Alrighty everyone, so what I'm doing today and tonight and tomorrow is making a loaf of sourdough bread, and what I'm doing right now is just getting my starter ready to make the bread. So I feed my starter every night, but if you wanted to make bread, right, like you want the sourdough to be active, and by the time I get to it in the morning, it's already completely deflated. And so what I need to do is activate the starter in order to actually make the bread here, right? And so what I'm doing right now, I'm trying to keep about 100 grams of my starter right now, and so I've marked the amount, the weight of the cup on the side here just for easy tracking, and it's not super important that I get the exact amount here, right? But I know that I'm going to want to use 200 grams of starter for my dough, and so I want to try to keep to get this about 100 grams. And so when I feed this back up, we're going to get back to the amount that I want here, right? And so what I usually do here, and I think this is a pretty standard ratio, is to just use a 1:1:1 ratio of old starter to water to yeast, right? So I know that I had about 100 grams of starter in here. I added about 100 grams of water, and I'm adding about 100 grams of flour in here. You might notice I'm off by like a gram or so. I don't think that'll make that big of a difference at this stage here. Right, perfect. So we are good. And so the reason why these ratios are important is, so my understanding, I'm not a chemist here, but my understanding here, or biologist I guess I should say, is that you want there to be a certain level of acidity inside the starter. Otherwise you're going to have your starter go bad, right? It's going to start getting moldy, or you're going to have funguses growing in there. It's going to change colors, and not change color to like a gray, but to like a pink or a green, and that'll just be very bad. You basically killed your starter at that point, right? So in order to protect the starter, we want to maintain a certain level of acidity, hence those ratios here, right? And that's what I'm going for here. Now you might notice I was using the all-purpose flour. For feeding the starter, I generally just use all-purpose flour. I think in general you're supposed to use the starter, the type of flour they're using in the dough itself in general, right? But what I found is if I use bread flour, it just becomes way too active, right? I'll start getting something which will more than double in size. It'll usually blow out of the container. I actually swapped containers to reduce the risk of that happening, also to make the starter a little bit easier to work with, right? So right now this is just a 1:1:1 ratio of starter to water to flour. I'm going to let this, I'm going to go grocery shopping to get my other groceries for the week. And then once I'm back, I'll probably need to make dinner, and we'll get to actually setting up the dough after that. Alrighty, so I'll see you back here in about 3 or 4 hours. Alrighty, so it's been a few hours since I fed the starter, and you can see here that the starter is very active and bubbly. And what I'm going to do here is just going to measure out 200 grams of this. So I follow a 1:2:3 ratio. Oh, that's a little bit too much in general, which is what I got from, I think it was from Alex, the French guy cooking. But what I've started doing recently is changing it just a little bit to use a bit more water, because I found that I actually prefer the higher hydration. So I'm just going to reset this to 400. Okay, so I didn't add quite 500 grams of water here, but I'll add that last 15 grams with the salt later on. And so all I'm doing here is I'm trying to break the starter up into, get it immersed in the water. And I don't know if it actually makes a difference, but I'm basically trying to get the starter or the yeast to get into as much contact with the flour as I can here. Right, so let me just reset this thing here. So that was 200 grams of starter, 485 grams of water, and I'm going to add 600 grams of flour. And I said before that I was using all-purpose flour to feed the starter, and that was just to keep the starter from becoming too active. But here, I am using bread flour now because I actually want this thing to become very active, and I want the extra protein to get more gluten development. For a while, I actually thought about, like, is it actually worth it for me to keep like two separate types of flour? Like, it's not. It means like keeping track of extra ingredients, basically. But after many trials, I decided that yes, it is worth it. Okay, so I'm gonna add most of it here. Let me just get this started. So notice I'm just using a very small spoon for this. This is the spoon I usually use to mix the starter. But I'm not trying to mix it up super thoroughly. I'm just trying to get this initial thing set up, and then I can go in and I can add in more. I don't do anything fancy to keep my flour sealed, but I generally use it fast enough to not worry about it. So I'm just going to go there, and this is probably going to be too, yep, this is too thick now for me to do anything with. So I get rid of that. Move this off to the side here. Get that. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to get this roughly combined. And so I'm a firm believer in not really doing too much to the bread. I don't really try to knead it that much. Right now I'm just trying to make sure that all the flour gets wet, and that's about as much as I'll do with this thing. And what I've learned with bread is that, like, just all the different types of bread are almost all white bread, I should say. It's just like changing the ratio between the flour and the water. And so this is just the standard loaf that I end up making, but if you wanted to make other things, like, it's probably just adding more water or taking water out. This is going to end up becoming a decent sized chunk of dough here. Okay, this is, I'm going to take this just a little bit further. Right, it's starting to come together here, right? So I'm just going to let this sit for about 20 minutes, covered. I'm going to feed the starter again, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to add the salt after I've let this thing just sit here, right? So this next 20 minutes, right, this is called Autolyse. Right, and basically what we're doing is we're letting the dough hydrate, right? So we don't actually need to work it all that much, right? We'll get the folds that we want later on, and right now, because we haven't added the salt to it, the yeast is going to get a nice big head start. And so we'll add the salt in about 20 minutes. Let me just go ahead and portion out the salt now, actually. right? So let me 0 this. And for the salt, I might be a little bit superstitious on this. So I go out of my way to get an uniodized table salt. And so I actually want a table salt because I don't like using kosher salt for this, because the kosher salt crystals are quite large and it feels like they take a long time to break down in the dough, right? I feel like for a long time after I mix in the kosher salt, I can feel the salt crystals, right? So what I'm doing here is I'm actually going for about 24 grams, right? So I used to use 12 grams of this, and basically when I started adding more water, I also doubled the amount of salt that I was adding to this. Right? So this is going to be about 20, actually not quite 20, actually, sorry, I went closer to 20, I forgot. My own modifications to this recipe. Yeah, that's close enough. And actually add just a little bit of water to this, right? So my goal is about 500 grams of water. If I get there, it doesn't really matter. So, and then I'll leave this as here, as is, because I'll be adding water slowly every time I come here to fold the dough. Okay, and so with that, I'm going to feed the starter here, and I'll check back in about 20 minutes. Alrighty, so it's been about 20 minutes here, and I don't know if you can really see this on the video, but I can already tell that the dough is a lot smoother than it was before, right? So let me just give this a quick, yeah, look, see, like it is much better than it was before here. I guess I'm just giving this a loose toss, just trying to get the top part just like folded in a little bit to the dough here, trying to scrape down some of the sides. And I'm going to add my salt now, right? So okay. And what I'm doing here is I'm just giving this a rough kneading, right? So what I'm looking for right now is I can feel the salt crystals, like it feels like sand basically inside the dough, right? And what I'm just doing here is I'm just going to keep folding it for, I don't know, maybe a couple minutes here. I don't have a very good methodology for this, right? Like I know that there's a proper kneading technique, but basically I do this because it works, right? Like I haven't really felt a need to improve my technique, as it were, right? So I know this is suboptimal. This is just how I tend to fold dough, right? I try to make sure that whatever side my fingers are touching, right, ends up kind of buried inside the dough here, right? And I can already feel this is so much smoother. I don't know if you guys can tell how silky smooth this is. And just in those few minutes there, right, like the salt has completely disappeared. Right, it didn't take very long. I can already see, do you see how like now the dough kind of starts feeling like it's starting to fall apart on me, right? So I think what's happening here is I'm starting to tear the dough as opposed to fold the dough, right? I'm just going to keep going for another couple minutes here. It should sort of come back together, but again, I'm not too worried about this, right? I'm not trying to overwork this dough, work it too much. Yeah, I think I'm going to stop here because it's definitely falling apart on me, right? And so again, like the dough does not, like as I've been making dough longer and longer and longer, I've just come to appreciate the fact that like dough does not require a ton of work. I think less is often more, right? So I'm going to come back and I'm going to fold the dough. I don't do anything too fancy with the folds, but I'll show you at least one of the folds on camera. And then I generally come back and I fold this, I don't know, I do it about every 20 or 30 minutes or so initially, and then as the time goes on, those intervals start getting further and further apart, right? So we'll check back on this. I'll check back on this in about 20 minutes. Alrighty. So doughs are ready for a fold here, and so what I'm going to do, I'm just going to make sure that the bottoms are all free from the edges here, and then I just do like a 4-point fold, right? And then this last corner, pull up, over, and just like give the whole thing a little bit of a turn so that we got the smooth side up now, right? You can see that I got a little bit sticking to my fingers, but not very much because I wet my hands before I started, right? So I'm going to do that for another 20 minutes. In terms of feel, right, the dough is still smooth. It isn't quite taut yet, though, right? So I could tell that it doesn't really have much structure right now. So we'll let this go for another 20, 30 minutes. I'll do another flip. We'll do some more, our fold. We'll do some more folds over, yeah, over the next few hours. Okay, so it's been about 30 minutes here. Just gonna get my hands wet again. Gonna go around, and I can already tell that the dough is really starting to come together. Right, oh look, I got a nice bubble here. I'm just gonna pop that at this stage because we're still very early in the process. And I said we're very early, but I think this dough. So I was just thinking to myself that this dough might be ready a little bit sooner than I'm expecting, right? So I'll check on it again in about another 45 minutes or so. We'll see how things are looking. Okay, so I think this is starting to get in a good spot. I'm going to let this go for not as long this time, maybe another 20 minutes. I don't think I'm going to fold it again. What I am going to do, though, is start prepping my Banneton. So these are little baskets of I don't know what kind of wood this is, if it even has wood. It's been a while since I have used this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to re-season it a little bit. Just getting it damp. Okay, so what I'm going to use here is a mixture of all-purpose flour and rice flour. Right, so the all-purpose flour is going to give it that. So the rice flour is going to give it that those white. Floury flakes. It's going to give it like a little bit of texture once it's done cooking, right? So the flour is just all going to brown, but the rice flour is not going to brown as much. And what I'm doing here is I just sprayed some water into this thing, and I'm just using the refreshed like flour and rice flour to fill in all these gaps. And this dough is probably going to fill this Banneton quite nicely here, and so I am trying to get a lot of these things filled up all the way to the top. And the rice flour, again, it's got like this coarse consistency, right? But when you mix the two of them together, kind of get like the best of both worlds. Okay, so it's 11 o'clock right now. I started the dough around 8 o'clock. So it's been kind of just doing its thing over here for about 3 hours now. I got my Banneton set up. I'm going to give this, because I just folded it, I'm going to give this thing maybe like another 10 or so minutes, 10, 15 minutes. And then I will I don't really properly shape the dough, but I'm gonna get it ready to fit inside the Banneton. And so we'll check back in about 15 minutes. Okay, so we let the dough sit for like 20 minutes now, and I know this is not a proper shaping, but I'm just going to show you what I do to get the dough into the Banneton. So I try not to use too much flour here, but I'm just going to sprinkle enough on here to get it a little bit of coating, and I'm going to emphasize, drop a little bit more flour off on this edge. And I might not look like a lot, or maybe it looks like too much, but what I'm just doing here is I'm just gently coating the top. Right, and part of the main reason why I do it this way is just that laziness. I don't really want to dirty up the countertop to fold it, and I don't really want to have to pull out my fine mesh strainer to dust this with the flour here. I'm just going to rub this on my hands just a little bit. My hands are pretty dry right now, so that's fine. And what I'm basically doing, right, so the whole point of shaping is to get a nice skin to appear on the, like to make the skin taut, right? And just because I don't shape doesn't mean I don't do that in my own way, right? So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to fold this. Basically, I'm going to let it drop out the bottom here. What I'm doing right now is I'm just trying to pinch the top of this sort of closed here. I think that is happy. How I did that. Right, so by holding it, I kind of let the center fall through this. I'm pulling the outer edge out, and that achieves a similar effect to the shaping. Might not be perfect, but it gets it most of the way there. Right, and now all I have to do now is clean up. There's one bowl here. So I'll clean that up later. In terms of storage, so this thing needs to be kept in a humid environment. And I'm going to achieve that by just taking one paper towel here. I'm going to wet this thoroughly. Oh, I should mention before I go ham on this thing, I forgot that I actually usually try to get a little bit of extra flour all the way around the rim here. Just because the dough has a tendency to stick to the sides of the Banneton a little bit here. Right. So it's gonna expand a little bit of this end. This dough is actually a little bit smaller than I am used to at this stage. I probably could have let it work for another 45 minutes or so, but I opted to just go ahead and get moving here because it is already getting a little bit late. But that is okay. We can just compensate for this a little bit in the freezer. Right, so putting this out here. Okay. Okay, that's good. I'll take this thing. So this is very damp, right? Like I put this in the water, and the reason for that is I want to make sure that when I put it in a bag, this thing has plenty of hydration, right? Just trying to make sure that it's loosely spread on here. I'm giving it a little bit of slack so that it's able to expand as needed. And then this is just one of like a bag that I've had for a few years now, right? And like I just keep using it because like, so this is originally for rotisserie chicken. I think this was from Costco. And I mean, like, I just needed a bag which is big enough to fit this, right? So any bag which is big enough to hold the Banneton. What I do like doing is when I close this thing, I like to trap a little bit of air inside there. Oh, and I just close this with the binder clip. Not that binder clip. So now, there's a good chunk of air in here. I don't have to worry about the, like there's already the paper towel. Now, make sure that this thing is basically not going to hit the dough as the dough is rising. Okay, so I got this thing here, and this is it. And this is going to sit in the fridge overnight, and when you guys see this in the morning, it is going to be time to put this in the oven. Alrighty, so it is currently the next day. I have had my oven preheated to 425, and I've had my Dutch oven and lid both in there for about 45 minutes. I just put it in there while we were having lunch. And so now I'm gonna get the bread ready. Right. So this has been fermenting for about 14 hours now. I put it away last night around like 11:30 or so. It's actually not as... So sometimes what I'm doing is like it expands more than I'm expecting it to, and other times it's expanding a little bit less. And this is actually one of the smaller expansions, but that is okay. It should turn out just the same. So you can see here, right, that it's coming apart nicely from the sides here, right? There is always the risk that on the bottom side here, it's going to remain attached. I often have little pieces of the dough that get stuck into the crevices, but once they detach, everything ends up working out, right? So I'm just getting this prepped. I'm keeping the Dutch oven in the oven for now, but I want to do the last few steps of prep here, right? So I'm just going to invert this here. Oh, I can feel the dough coming out very nicely, right? So I just lift this up. Oh, that is nice. Okay, and I pulled out a bald spot onto the, or created a bald spot on the Banneton here, but that is okay. Okay, so I'm just going to get a, where is the knife when I need it? Here it is. So, based off of how long I've been doing this, I really should have a lom, which is a razor blade attached to a handle to make my scoring. But I found that paring knife works just well, and I know I can do a whole bunch of fancy things. I noticed I've just been burned by trying to do fancy things in the past, right? So I should note that this thing came right out of the fridge, right? So there's some debate online about, like, should you take it out of the fridge for a little bit? Should you leave it in the leave it on the counter for while your oven's preheating? And I just leave it in the fridge until I'm just about ready to bake, right? So let me get back to scoring here really quick, right? So for the scoring, you just want to do a very quick, firm motion, right? So right? I cut through many of the deep layers and made a nice clean cut, right? Here we go, and that should be fine. Okay, now what I'm going to do here, so I learned I have been burned in the past by not having proper oven mitts, right? We had oven mitts that only came up to like to my wrist, and I'm just trying to make sure my hands are very dry before I do this because everything is very hot right now. So first things first, I need to clear up a little bit of space, right? You always want to have a landing spot for our hot stuff, right? So this is the Dutch oven. I'm going to do this quickly here, right? So I'm getting this out. I'm getting the dough into the oven. Right, and then there's many ways you could do this. People use an ice cube trick. I just make sure that there's plenty of moisture in the top there. Okay, and yeah, we'll let this go for, I usually go for about 20 or 25 minutes with the lid on, right? And about 20-25 minutes with the lid off, just depending. So I'm going for like a total cook time of about 45 minutes. And I will see you in about 25 minutes. Alrighty, so my oven timer has just gone off. It's been 25 minutes here. I tried to get the place cleaned up a little bit while I was waiting because I like to stay close to the kitchen whenever I have the bread in the oven here. Okay, so let me just take a look at this thing here, right? So I'm just gonna remove the lid, right, and notice how much bigger the bread got, right? So that is the oven spring, right? It was quite low initially. Now it is like, it was risen almost to the height of the lid, and it is where I made the cuts the scores have all really expanded, right? So that, oops, that first set, the first cooking stage was for the oven spring to get the bread going initially here. The second cooking here is to get it to brown, right? So you might have seen how pale the bread was. That is totally normal for this stage, and by the time we come back to this in about 20 minutes, the bread should take on some nice color, right? So I'll see you back in 20-ish minutes or so. Alrighty, my timer just went off, and I'm gonna take a peek at the bread to see how this looks. Okay. And it's looking good. I'm seeing some dark spots on the top there, but I think I can take it a little bit further. Right, so I'm just gonna give this a quick twirl and let this go for another 5 minutes or so, and then it should be done by then. Alrighty, so it's been another 5 minutes. I think that brings the total cooking time up today to about 50 minutes. Yeah, and you can see how much more the bread has browned in just those last 5 minutes there, right? So, so I'm always torn about what to do this, so I'm going to turn this off first. There is a technique where you let the bread cure in the oven for like, I don't know, an hour with the door cracked open. I have things to do today, so I'm not going to be able to do that, but that is something that people can do, and I might do that another time. But anyway, you can see here that the bread is looking good, right? And so I can't let the bread just sit in here, unfortunately, because as good as it looks, if you just leave the bread in here, the bottom is actually going to get really, really soggy. You're going to have a literal puddle of water in there eventually. So what I'm doing is I'm just getting a wire rack, and I'm gonna gently pull this out here. Right? I used to use longer pieces of wax paper to try to get the bread out more easily. What I would find is that those edges of the wax paper would burn and crumble whenever I put a load on them. Right? And so this thing has to cool, right? You cannot cut it open because there's a lot of moisture inside there right now, and the dough hasn't actually set yet on the inside, right? So if I were to cut the bread open now, all that moisture would escape, and then the bread will become all gummy without actually really setting, right? So when you let this thing sit here, I am actually taking half of that bread with me as a gift, and so I'm going to cut it open a little bit earlier than I would like. It is 2:30 right now. I'll probably cut it open around 5, so we'll see what it looks like after a couple hours here. So I'll see you in about 2.5 hours. Alright everyone, so this is the bread, and I'm going to cut into it just a little bit earlier than I would like because I need to take this as a gift, but if I just crinkle across, I don't know if you can hear the crackle. So let's just slice into it and see what this looks like. and that is beautiful. I got a large bubble here, but overall I am happy with the crumb. All right, so I'm going to pack this up, and I will see you guys next time.